And welcome back to the program 208. It is a Tuesday afternoon. It is a cloudy day out there and a little bit nicer tomorrow. A little bit nicer. Let's inch closer and closer to the nice weather, right? Some sunshine tomorrow with temperatures actually in the 50s, according to Chelsea Priest at the Channel 6 ABC 6 Weather Center. And we'll watch that for you. And hopefully we'll pull some even warmer temperatures out of the hat before the week is out, right? Well, today is Small Business Day on Beacon Hill in Boston. Massachusetts politicians have long held a pile-on philosophy when it comes to business. Locally, they shift the tax burden away from homeowners and to business owners. And you know why that is, right? Because the homeowners vote. And businesses wind up oftentimes paying the lion's share of the taxes and the tax burden. Statewide, lawmakers will create one feel-good social program after another, come up with mandates, and then just simply pass the cost on to business. State has no problem in asking business to fund various programs and various things that it wants done. Well, many businesses were lucky to survive the national economic downturn, fending off internet competition with one hand while battling crippling government regulations with the other. This will have a devastating effect on Main Street across the Commonwealth if it's allowed to continue this way. As a result of that, small business owners by the hundreds are gathered in Beacon Hill today, or on Beacon Hill today. Groups such as MassPAC, RAM, the Associated Industries of Massachusetts, National Federation of Independent Businesses, several chambers of commerce, and they're lobbying lawmakers and Governor Baker, saying enough is enough. The regulations, the mandates, the taxes, the high energy costs, it's just too much for us to bear, and we need some help here. Rob Mellion, who many of you remember through his many appearances here on my program, used to be the president and CEO of the Fall River Area Chamber of Commerce, later became Bristol County Chamber of Commerce. Rob is now the executive director and general counsel at the Massachusetts Package Stores Association. He's with us live on the line from Boston in the State House right now. And Rob, thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
It is great to be back with you. How are you doing, Barry?
I'm doing great, and I miss having you in, and I'm glad you were able to make it today and give us an update on what's happening right now from a very hot location, because this is where it's happening. This is where business is saying, hey, look, we provide most of the jobs for people. We provide a lot of stuff that go on in the community. We sponsor the local sports teams. We're there for the civic causes and everything else. But you guys are putting us out of business, and without us, there's going to be a dramatic impact. And
that is exactly the message that a handful of legislators and Governor Baker heard today from business people. So, just taking it from the Massachusetts Package Store Association standpoint, we represent 140,000 jobs in Massachusetts. We represent an additional about 61,000 jobs that are associated with us, but not directly associated with us. We're over $1 billion in taxes to Massachusetts and $1.8 billion of taxes federally. So that's just package stores. That's just your little package store on South Main Street, amplified times 3,000 in Massachusetts. So these stores, along with your restaurants, your beauty salons, your local painters, your plumbers, you name it, the folks over at WBSM, it's a small business. They're getting hit from every possible direction. And this has been going on for years, as you well know. I mean, it's sick day leave in 2014. It is the highest energy costs in the country, year after year after year. And now it's these referendums all at one time. And I'll tell you, people got an earful today. Over 200 business owners came up to Beacon Hill, took time out of their businesses, came up to say, you're killing us. You're knocking us out. And it was across the room a bunch of very angry people who, in and of themselves, are billions of dollars to the Massachusetts economy.
So we're talking this fall about ballot questions dealing with such issues as increasing the minimum wage. We're talking about the Paid Family and Medical Leave Act. We're talking about the so-called millionaire's tax. These are things that are going to have a direct impact on the people that provide the bulk of the jobs here in the Commonwealth.
The problem is that it's legislation without thinking about the impacts to the business community. And the fact is, it goes to the voters. Who doesn't want to give themselves a raise? And that's what businesses are afraid of, because we have no say in what's happening to us. And, the problem is, again, we're legislating through ballot questions rather than legislating through the legislative process. And in the legislative process, there's hearings. There's an opportunity to come up with something that at least is not something that breaks the camel's back. So as an example, with the Paid Family and Medical Leave bill, you're talking about 16 weeks of paid family leave, 26 weeks of paid medical leave, and it's one of the only bills in the entire country where employers have to come up with 50% of it. Rhode Island has a paid family and medical, but it's on the employees, not the employers. Now, people listening are saying, well, why shouldn't the businesses pay? Well, because businesses are also paying for sick pay leave. Businesses are paying for unemployment insurance. Businesses are paying currently one of the highest unemployment insurance rates in the country, but one of the highest minimum wages in the country. Businesses are paying the highest electricity costs in the country.
Well, the other thing people don't think about,
to pay this too.
Yeah, when people think about this and they say, "Hey, this is good, and it's only fair business contribute to this," but what you don't think about is a business has to also pay for that person's replacement.
Businesses have to make a profit. What we were hearing from the restaurant industry in particular is that their margins are about 5%. So now you take away tip wages, you make it so that goes away, and you bring people to more of a fixed minimum wage, and on top of that, you put on these additional benefits that the restaurants are going to have to pay. Many of them are done. They are going to be done. And, it's all fine, but one of the reasons why our economy is booming in Massachusetts, macroly, is because we have all these small businesses for large businesses to leverage. Large businesses kind of live off of all these small businesses. And, you see what's going on in downtown New Bedford. You see what's going on in downtown Fall River. There's a lot of dark storefronts as we speak. And that's just not resonating with the media. It's not resonating with legislators. It's going to amplify if we don't start listening to these people.
So what kind of reaction did you get?
Well, we got a mixed reaction from legislators who were present. There were a handful who understood. For example, State Representative Keiko Oro, she was there, and she seemed to understand the impact of what's happening amongst the constituency that she represents. But there were some who they listened politely, but said, well, you people need to come up with something that helps these other people out as well. Well, that angered a room full of people who were taking time out of their companies. They couldn't believe they were hearing that from elected officials. And their response back to them is, no, you need to listen to us, because we are the Massachusetts economy. And you're not listening to us. You're listening to the people in the purple shirts. Well, we're the ones who employ the people in the purple shirts, and we're not making money. And they heard stories from people who have condensed their businesses, who are living on top of the building that their business is out of now. They're not living in a home anymore. They're living on top of their own business. So they heard those stories. They heard about people who they're ready to throw in the towel. They just can't survive anymore. And it took a lot to get to this point, but hopefully it was a starting point that people begin to listen to the small business community, because if we don't, there won't be very many of them. And you understand this again at WBSM, because the bulk of your business model is off of advertising from small businesses. Well, if businesses are paying for all these additional fees, they're not going to have money to advertise, Barry.
You said earlier to me, legislators bend over backwards for social groups at their expense. And then you said Main Street businesses are being targeted by labor activists and those pushing an agenda that will harm the ability to operate small businesses. So the politicians are being beholden to some of these labor groups and social groups.
So a dirty fact up in Boston is that there are exemptions in place. There are legislative exemptions in place on money that comes from the unions that goes to legislative campaigns. If MassPAC, for example, writes a check for $200, the whole world knows about it. But when one of the unions writes a check for $10,000, very few people know about it. That's one of the disparities that goes on in Massachusetts.
So how do these politicians explain this away? How do they rationalize the fact that business has the responsibility to fund so many of these different social programs? Why is it business's responsibility to do that?
So the way that this happens typically, and we addressed this today, and it's come up in hearings that I've been part of in the past. What typically happens, Barry, is that a lot of these issues play out up at Beacon Hill in a vacuum. So you get busloads of people who are taking advantage of their sick pay leave and are coming in at the invitation of Raise Up and other organizations to testify up at Beacon Hill. And as I said, they're coming in through the busloads, and they're talking about, in a vacuum, how employer-paid family and medical is going to help them have a better life, how a $15 minimum wage, in a vacuum, not talking about employer-paid family and medical, not talking about sick pay leave, but in a vacuum, $15 minimum wage is going to help them pay for their family's expenses. So these issues get played out in a vacuum, and it's busloads of people that are brought in to testify, one after another for 3 hours. Well, businesses don't go up and testify because they're running their business. And in addition to that, as I said, these issues come up in a vacuum. And what I have repeatedly said in testimony is that to legislators, I've said this repeatedly, you can't take these issues in a vacuum. A business who's paying the bills doesn't pay bills in a vacuum. They have to sit there and pay them all. And that's the problem with this. They're advocated in a vacuum, but in reality, it's the totality of them that are crushing the small business person in particular.
Well, one thing, too, that we've seen a trend developing in the last few years, Rob, is this initiative petition route. And this allows the lawmakers not to have to take a controversial stand that might hurt their standing with the voters. They can just let it kick over to the initiative petition
That's right.
process.
And we're seeing that play out right now. Now, in the past, it was just one or two petitions that were in play. This year, we're looking at 3 major legislative initiatives that are going to go to ballot, plus one that's been put forward by the business community on sales tax. So 4 major business initiatives going to ballot this year because the legislative process is being circumvented. So that's employer-paid family and medical. That's the minimum wage for $15. It's the millionaire's tax, which is not a millionaire's tax. It's a small business tax. I've said that repeatedly because it's a tax on any income over $1 million, and a majority of that money is going to come from LLCs and S-corps. It's also going to come from real estate transfers, and it's going to come from when businesses sell inventory. That's where the money from that one comes from. And then you've got the sales tax initiative to lower the sales tax to 5%. So these are all in play right now. And, the problem with the family and medical leave and the problem with the $15 minimum wage is that the way that it was worked in the referendum is that they will be, after they're initially put into place, they will then index with inflation so that the costs will continue to rise without legislation in the future. And that is very scary to businesses who will have no say in the future in containing the cost of these measures that are going to be brought in from ballot questions by voters who are effectively voting to give themselves a raise.
So did you get any sense at all that you said some were sympathetic, others just kind of, stared at you blankly? Did you get any sense at all that you made any progress today, that anything is going to change as a result of this?
I think that the fact that several legislators for the first time saw and heard from probably several $billion worth of economic impactors in one room. And I would have to say they probably heard from, I mean, there were at least 25 package store owners who were in the room today. Think about that. There were probably close to 70 restaurant owners who were in the room today. The key people at Roach Brothers were there. The people from Stop and Shop were there. I mean, it was such a mixed group of small business people. I've never seen anything like it. So the fact that you saw so many people from across the state, I saw people from the Berkshires, I saw people from the Cape, I saw people from New Bedford who were there. I think the fact that they saw so many people leave their business and come up to Boston at their expense to say enough is enough. And then from there, they went to the Capitol and went room to room talking to their legislators. That, in my time, has never happened before. So that had to put people on notice that something's wrong, that they've gone too far. I think now the key is going to be follow-up. I think this can't be a one and done. I think that this has to be followed up by conversations all through Massachusetts with legislators, with the media, and others, because we're only hearing one side of this. I read the editorials, and I'm only seeing one side to this. And they have to realize there's an economic impact to these decisions.
You know, it's another thing that's become a sign of our time, too, is that we have politicians that are professional politicians, and this is what they do, whereas small business folks have to stay back home and run the stores and run the operations and can't get involved at that level.
Barry, let me give you a great example of this. So last year, for a very brief moment, there was noise all across the Commonwealth when the legislature gave themselves a raise that accounted for about $18 million.
Yeah. The
same money, but then simultaneously said, we can't have a sales tax holiday for 2 days because it's going to cost about $18 million to the Commonwealth.
Mm-hmm.
That's officially a disconnect. That's a disconnect.
Right.
You give yourself a $17, $18 million raise collectively, but you don't give the taxpayers in this state a reduction. That's a disconnect.
Yeah, and they're deaf to all of this. They don't get it. They don't get it, absolutely. So how can the people listening right now, how can they help out? Besides shopping local and supporting the local businesses, how can they help out with this?
A lot of people listening to us right now know their state rep. They know their state senator. Tell them what's on your mind. Tell them that Main Street needs to be protected, or there won't be a Main Street. People's voices are very strong, particularly when they're amplified times 20. And then, folks, you got to vote, but you got to vote with common sense. When you go to the ballot this November, you have to think about the consequences and not just with what you think is good for the moment. If we're going to have a whole round of businesses go out of business, nobody wins. And if we're going to have businesses lay people off or not hire, then where's the win for the Commonwealth? We have to be rational about this, Barry.
Rob Mellion is the Executive Director and General Counsel of the Massachusetts Package Stores Association. He's up on Beacon Hill right now fighting for the life and future of small business. Rob, appreciate you taking a few minutes with us.
Thank you for having me on, Barry.
We'll chat again.
Yep.
All right, there goes Rob Mellion. Interesting story. And this is a story that for as long as I've been here and prior to my coming here, Rob and I have been talking about, and we've been watching the deterioration of small business. And there are a couple of things that are going on here that Rob points out quite well. And one of them is the fact that we have a legislative body now that has allowed itself to be dictated to by labor unions and by these social groups, these groups that represent social causes. And he's right. They bus people from all over the Commonwealth up to Beacon Hill to these hearings, and they chant and hey, hey, ho, ho, and we deserve paid leave and family medical leave act and this, that, and the other thing. We deserve $15 an hour, and they are represented. and they are just over and over and over, one after another, all day long. While the business people are minding the store. They don't have the time to go up and hey and ho. And all of this gets passed on to the business. And the other element of all of this is that lawmakers, when it comes to the controversial stuff, are refusing to do their jobs. They won't vote on a lot of this stuff. They kick it over to initiative petition. See, a lot of these social groups have gotten smart. And they say, hey, wait a minute, if we can't get what we want through the legislature, we'll collect the signatures and put it on the ballot. Because as Rob said, who would not want to vote themselves a pay raise? If you're making, what, $9 an hour, $10, whatever the minimum is now, $11, and you want to get $4 more an hour, sure, I'll sign the petition. Tell me where. So rather than our state lawmakers dealing with this stuff, they're sitting back and letting it go to petition, which means ballot question, which means you get to go and vote for it. And people will approve this stuff. You got the millionaire's tax coming up, which Rob says is a tax on business. You've got the Family and Medical Leave Act coming up, the minimum wage, millionaire's tax. That's all just on this year's ballot. And business is charged with paying for all of this. So you think business, well, you know, business, they make a lot of money, Barry. They get rich, you know. All of these stores, Walmart, they treat their people like slaves and they make a whole lot of money. We're not talking about Walmart. Although Walmart is being impacted by this too. Anybody been to Walmart lately here in Fairhaven or Dartmouth? And you see the great big area now with the self-checkout? You ever notice that that area is getting bigger and bigger and bigger? You know what's next, right? When we have family leave and medical, paid family and medical leave, when we have that, when we have a $15 minimum wage, you know what's next. You know how big that self-checkout is going to get after that, right? But that's wonderful. So we're talking about these big national companies, right? They get rich. But we're also talking about the mom and pop restaurants and the dress shops and the barber shops. Any place that you go to, the local businesses that sponsor your son or daughter's baseball team, that give money to the charities, that give when you need to have a fundraiser, that give the gift certificates, that give the prizes for the Chinese auctions. These are your local merchants, your mom and pop stores that are responsible for 85% of all of the jobs in the country. These are the people that we are putting the squeeze on all the time, that they are facing stiffer and stiffer and stiffer competition every day from the internet. So not only are they battling technology, they're battling their own government, who keeps piling on and piling on and piling on. 508-996-0500. You call us the next day with us.